All right, let's take a look at the next patch, 14.11. Let's go.
Hey everybody, Riot Mort here with another patch rundown. It's the patch 14.11 rundown. This patch, we decided to take it pretty light. We're not going to shift the meta pretty dramatically. People are still kind of figuring out how to play optimal lines, what makes the difference between them. We're seeing pretty good amount of comps, you know, so maybe some more adjustments in the future. But for now, it's a pretty small patch. So let's dive right into it and
strange. So it's a small. Oh wow, it's a really small patch right now. They're only changing 2 things right now in the trades. I think it's because they're trying to keep it a stable tournament environment, but tournaments are done with another cycle. We have 3 cycles in competitive, at least in the West, and outside of China, I'm not entirely sure how China is actually working. And so this would be a patch where you could make big changes once more, and then tweak it for the next upcoming tournament once again. So it's interesting that they wait for a light patch. It probably means that they think balance is in a good spot or
so
close.
First off, 8 Ghostly not performing as well as something we would want to have with +2 spats. So 8 Ghostly is getting a buff from 32 to 36%.
Is 8 Ghostly even that bad?
And then Trick Shot, yep, we're undoing the Trick Shot nerf. This nerf ended up being a little too much. It's making Kai'Sa too hard to play. Some of the Trick Shot builds, so this should help things like Teemo, Bard, and especially Kai'Sa come back to be as comparable as to things like Lilia and Ashe.
Okay, so let's take a look at this real quick. 8 Bruiser that's currently on this patch, Diamond Plus 1410B. 8 Ghostly does as well as 6 Dryad, which requires, I guess, 1 spat. 6 Warden requires 1 spat. 8 Bruiser. Oh, I see what they're saying. Like, all these require like 1 emblem. And so because it requires 2, it feels like it should be closer to 6 Porcelain. I mean, it is a buff, and it's like a pretty sizable buff. It's like over 10%. Okay, I see where they're coming from, I suppose. I don't feel like 8 Ghostly is like that bad, but I guess it's like, because the stats on it are actually quite good. It just feels like it's pretty situational. I'm guessing they feel like they want it to be more impactful. I think it's gonna make it, if 8 Ghostly is good, it's gonna be really good. And then Trick Shot, I don't even know if Trick Shot's even that bad right now. If you look at Trick Shot, for Trick Shot 4.5, I think that's fine. I'm surprised they're buffing it back again. I guess I feel like Kai'Sa is struggling a lot right now, but I think the problem with Kai'Sa isn't actually her damage. I actually think a lot of it is the front line that you play with Kai'Sa, because like Galio and all that kind of struggled. Part of it is that Kai'Sa and Trick Shots can struggle a little bit to keep up with some of the bursts in the meta, like duelists and whatnot. But I do feel like Trick Shots are actually okay-ish. I actually feel like it's some of the other units. We'll see. If he buffs some of the other units that are underperforming, like Galio, Kane, etc., like some of these underperforming forecasts, I think that might make more sense. When it was 60% on the previous patch, it averaged like a 4.2 or 4.1 or something like that. And I think because the meta was different. So maybe because there's like Lilia and other things that can get backline access now that can potentially snipe Kai'Sa. Like I see Kai'Sa die all the time to like Lilias now and Morganas because they just like clump. Maybe Trick Shot ends up being fine.
So hopefully that helps Trick Shot out. On the champion side, Darius 1 and 2, very small nerf, really tiny.
Very small nerf. What is this in parentheses? Large. Very small nerf. Large. If this is okay, maybe it's like the largest nerf of the patch. Who knows?
Hopefully this slows down early duelists a little bit.
Yeah, but we should buff Yasuo. That'll slow down early duelists.
Bit of a small nerf for Darius. Garen. Yep, we're undoing this buff as well.
Yeah.
Storied champion. Way too good.
Yep.
We do want Garen to be good without Story Champion, but like it is what it is. So undoing the 10 mana buff from last time.
Someone was in the co-stream over the tournament this past weekend was saying like, does someone at Riot like have a crush on Garen? Because like they always buff Garen to the point where he's like good as a reroll composition. In every set 9 he was the juggernaut guy that spun right. Set 10 he's like the reroll meme HP growing, and now they're Story Weaver champion. Like every single set there's always like a Garen reroll that eventually gets buffed to be way too good. So we had our patch. I guess this is the patch where Garen was way too good.
Yasuo, this
looks... actually I would say that this actually, yes, it does impact him, but I'm pretty sure Story Champion will still be very good. I don't know if it's I don't know if it's 3.8 good. If you look at the stats on it, it's 3.8 on the average placement. It might be like 4.0, but it's still going to be really good. Probably still S tier. We'll see.
It's like a buff, and it technically is, but it's a bit of a weird one. Yasuo was a weird champion that when he starred up, his spell didn't actually do more damage. So this is really just kind of fixing that oversight more than it is a massive buff or anything. I don't think this is going to make
45 to 70% looks like a big buff.
But yeah, it turns out his spell just wasn't doing more damage because it's based off of armor and MR. So
okay,
fixing that.
interesting.
Gnar gets a little bit of a buff to his max stacks to help out some of the
Wait, Gnar got buffed?
reroll comps. Try to get them up to that same level as things like that Ashe and Lilia comps that are doing well, or the Duelist comps.
Gnar's actually pretty good right now, but I guess he's like situational, and you're not supposed to reroll him very often. The biggest downside to Gnar is that he's contested by faded compositions that want to play Dryad like Syndra, or people that want to play like Wardens, and they're holding Gnars in the mid game because they're playing 4 Warden Sniper, or they're playing Garen reroll with Wardens, and they pick up Gnars. That's the big downside. I don't think Gnar's actually particularly bad. Also, I think this marks like the 4th or 5th patch in a row where they've like changed Gnar. They kept like nerfing him. They nerfed his like they like either nerfed his amount of stacking, or they nerfed his percentage, or they like reworked so that like he stacks it twice as fast. But yeah, like it's actually crazy. They keep tweaking Gnar every single patch. I don't think this is necessary personally. I think Gnar is actually pretty good already.
Nautilus, very small mana nerf.
Okay.
Down.
So
should be a hit to both the Warden and the Mythic lines.
Yeah.
2 lines.
Lilia and Ashe.
Good. Again, really tiny here.
Really
Syndra.
tiny. He keeps talking about tiny changes, and it's like the large change. It's just funny to me.
This one's a complicated one, so bear with me. If you want later, I can show you a graph. But basically, what these numbers mean is 1 star, the first cast is nerfed, the second cast is slightly nerfed, and then third is fine, 4th and higher are higher. At 2 star, it's just a pure buff. The first cast is literally the same, and each one goes
We're
up
just
by
buffing
about 2%.
Syndra.
So it is a buff to Syndra overall. It is
Why?
meant to be a buff, but
Wait.
it's really minor. We're talking like 2-3%. And it
I feel like something's got to give,
in.
man.
So, but it is not quite on the same level as back when her starting orbs were 8 or whatever. But
okay,
right, Lissandra definitely
buffing
nerfed
Syndra
after we took away her throw. Giving her a little bit more damage, try to get those kills. Don't think it's going to swing much, but it is a small Lissandra buff.
Lissandra actually is not that bad right now. People think she's like completely unplayable garbage, but she's okay. Small buffs. This buff actually is not that big of a deal. This actually is a small buff if you look at the percentage thing. We're just buffing Syndra. We're not changing like units that I think can could use some love, like Galio, for example. Galio in general is like pretty underperforming. I don't even think Syndra need a buff because yeah, I guess like they're saying the 1-star version is nerfed, which means that she's not nearly as stable on the roll down for level 8. But this is really surprising to me. Very, very surprising to me. I feel like if there's any forecast that could probably use a buff, I would have maybe picked up Galio a tiny bit. And maybe Kane as well. I'm very surprised that it's Syndra. In fact, if you look at the top performing, I'm looking at data, which is not always the end all be all, but Syndra does well in the stats, and she does well in tournament data. So I'm surprised that they felt like they needed to adjust her in this way. It could be one of those things where Syndra is a unit that's complained about a lot. Maybe people like playing her because she's like this big giant scaling mage, and so she's a really popular champion. She's not performing relative to expectations. But I think this is pretty surprising.
On the item side, Cursed
and that's
Blade.
It.
We finally fixed the bug with Cursed Blade, so our 20th artifact is...
Wait, that's it? That's all the changes to the champions? We're going to... Usually when we go items, that means we're done with like augments and stuff as well.
Coming online, 15% attack speed, 20 magic resist. Attacks reduce the target's max health by 3%. So if you're
and we're bringing back Cursed Blade.
Tom Kench, you can take that down. Should be good. Diamond Hands, best artifact in the game. It's going to lose 100 health.
I hate this item, man.
Moonstone Renewer, the best support item in the game, is going to lose 40 health on the shield.
Oh, wait,
so
that's a huge nerf.
To 360 should make Moonstone Renewer a little bit less of an auto pick.
Little bit less? This is like the 40 shield early game is a really big deal because it's multiple targets multiple times, so it adds up over the course. Well, I mean, maybe I'm not calculating things correctly, but this feels like a big nerf. Maybe because it looks like it's 100 to 60, but that flat shield is like really important early game to help snowball, and that's why Moonstone Renewer is very good. Diamond Hands nerf is justified. The thing is way too good. They're buffing Big Gem 50 HP. Okay, I don't think Big Gem's problem is the health. I think it's probably the tick. I think they could afford to move Big Gem maybe like 1 or 2 seconds faster, and that might help.
Needlessly Big Gem, one of the worst support items, giving it a little bit more health to hopefully help that person survive. When it procs, should be more damage. Again, very minor stuff.
Yeah.
On the augment side,
oh wait, never mind. They did items and augments.
Uplink at all ranks will no longer appear on 2-1.
Oh.
Realistically, these augments performed very poorly that early when you don't have many items.
Yeah, because you don't have items.
So those will appear later now. Built different, definitely a victim of some of the 4-cost balancing here. So built different kind of get its last nerf undone.
Dude.
So the HP goes back up, the attack speed goes back up. Hopefully some built different builds should be playable.
Does anyone know like how bad build different actually is? It's like basically fortune tier of stats. Just look at build different. It is astoundingly bad. I ventured if you increase the rank, it actually gets even. Yeah, dude, you increase the rank because good players know how to maximize fortune. It is the worst performing augment in the game by like standard deviations. Oh my god, and it's even more pronounced at GM plus. Holy cow, that is preposterously terrible. At the very highest level at GM the Challenger Plus, it is shockingly bad, horrifically terrible. So man, this is a much needed buff. Thank God. Otherwise, they should just disable the augment. Like this is literally then worse than this is actively griefing your game. This is worse than playing down an augment. Actively griefing your game.
Grim Harvest will now give instead of a Kha'Zix and a Kindred, a Kha'Zix and a Yone, and 1% more Omnivamp per stack. I don't think this is going to make it super playable.
They're
but
buffing Grim Harvest as well.
Lucky Paws, definitely a little too good, but only a little.
Nerfing Kabugo.
So damage comes down a bit. Too healthy, losing 9 health per 2 cost.
Overdue.
Into a low number there, kind of scaring me a bit. But Venerable Piggy Bank. This augment, if you can get it, is probably...
Wait, he says it's a low number, like he wants to nerf it more?
Losing 9 health per 2 cost. It's getting to a low number there, kind of scaring me a bit, but...
Oh, he's saying that he thinks that this is a impact, like too big of a nerf. Well, if you usually a lot of 2 healthy boards like to play 4 2 costs, so it's 4 times 9, so it's 36 across all your team times however many team members that you have. So if you play like a 7-unit board, that's multiple hundreds of HP. You know what? This it's just the thing is the 2 healthy enables too many. Like it's one of the things that spikes things like absolutely crazy. If you look at like for example Zyra reroll, the difference between Zyra reroll with 2 healthy versus like right here, the difference between 2 healthy Zyra versus like other things that theoretically should be good like Magic Wand, Combat Caster, Jewel Lord, like these are good augments for it, is more than half of an average placement. It's actually absurd how much it buffs some of these comps. So it is justified in some of the nerfs. It is ridiculously powerful in the comps that really wants to use it, and 2 healthy is even good in the comps that just want to play like the 2-cost bruisers, like Kai'Sa. Like for Kai'Sa and Galio, you play Aatrox, Teemo, and Riven, and then you get like a bunch of 2 healthy value at least. So I think it makes a lot of sense.
Venerable Piggy Bank. This augment, if you can get it, is probably the best augment in the game.
It's disgusting. 5 gold per turn
to get it to the point where it was a little too much auto win. So yes, taking 1 gold off the loss. So now instead of 2 for a win and 5 for a loss, it'll be 2 for a win and 4 for a loss. Still a lot of
big
gold.
Nerf.
Still a good augment.
That's a big nerf, but it's justified.
Prismatic augments. Dragon Lord Crown now gives a Janna and Diana.
That makes sense.
Matches the gold one now, so the prismatic doesn't look weird. Final Ascension no longer appears on 2-1. That's another augment you really shouldn't be taking on 2-1.
Sure.
And then Porcelain Crown now grants an Amumu instead of a Lux, small buff
to
Porcelain Crown. On the small side, trying to get some of the 3-star champions to open up a little bit more reroll options here. Kha'Zix reroll is actually doing okay, just maybe needs a small nudge. So Kha'Zix reroll is going to get a little bit more damage.
Kha'Zix Zero, by the way, was played twice in the America's Tacticians Cup and went 2nd and 3rd. Just saying. It might actually not even be that bad.
That spell. Sivir reroll is going to get some more ability buff and attack speed. So if you want to go Sivir 3, maybe open up some Storyweaver reroll.
I mean, this just makes maybe play Garen Sivir.
A lot better after the buff from last patch, but still not quite amazing. Is going to get some more heal on the 2 and 3-star. So we'll see if Aatrox...
Wait, they're buffing Aatrox and Senna 3?
But again, small buff.
Senna buffs?
And then Senna. Senna, you know, this buff is very tiny here. You can see 5% on the ability and 5%
like tiny. Yeah, this is a tiny buff. I can agree with this.
Reroll Senna. I know the ghostly version. Maybe this brings it back a little bit. But again, a lot of really minor nudges this patch.
Okay.
Diana, same thing. Diana 3 gets some more ability damage reduction and on-hit damage.
A3 is already kind of a force of nature.
Yone 3, get that shield back up and some ability damage. And then Kayn undoing that health nerf.
Oh, they are buffing Kayn. Oh, okay, good.
More health, help Kayn survive.
50 HP. I mean, they nerfed his HP, they nerfed its resistances, and they nerfed like a bunch of things around Kane as well. So, I mean, this is fine, giving him a little bit of compensation buff. This just kind of makes him a little bit stronger earlier at 1-star. But yeah, because remember, this also scales based off their like if they 2-star, it's based off of a percentage of what they have at their base HP. They're buffing Yone 3, and Yone 3 is a tipping point. Like the thing about Yone is that if he ends up being good, he ends up being pretty good because his because he just ends up executing and then like casting again, and he snowballs with that. So. We'll see. Maybe Yone's back on the menu. Diana 3, I think, was already pretty good, but the problem was hitting Diana 3 is really hard. So many duelist players want Diana, so in general, I don't think people see her. But if you ever played like the Janet Diana thing, Diana 3 ends up being pretty good. You just have to get there is the hard part. We'll see. This ends up making some of these 3-cost rerolls probably a lot stronger. Kane, little buff is good. I would love to have seen like a couple of the other 4 costs. Like we talked about Galio, for example. We'll see.
And then some bug fixes.
Oh, and that's it.
Big one here at the top.
That's actually
Morellonomicon and Crest of Cinders. Those are the Radiant versions.
It's bugged, yeah.
2% like their tooltip says. It was burning for 3%.
Yep. It was just wrong.
Why these items were performing very well. These are big nerfs to Radiant Morello and Radiant Red buff.
Yeah, that's a 50% nerf on their burn damage, which is a huge part of the reason why it was doing so well. And before they it actually said 2%, but it was 3% still, so it was a bug. These raid items might not be that good anymore. We'll see.
PvE monsters now have the intended 140% critical strike damage. Yay.
Okay.
Is
that why we're losing the crab?
Says after 0 player combats. Cool.
Okay.
Suspicious Trenchcoat copies now have the proper amount of HP and AD from their star level. This might actually end up as some of a buff in some situations. So hopefully not in the bruiser situations, but hopefully might make this item quite good.
Why would it be... Okay.
Because again, fixed various issues with the Trenchcoat copy's HP that could be inconsistent if they had their HP increased from other sources. So less, Silas abuse and more other cool builds that might open up.
Yeah, so basically, you would get bruiser value on your copies of Trenchcoat. I'm surprised that they say this is a buff, but maybe I'm misunderstanding the bug. I'll take their word on it. We'll see. It'll be reflected in the data.
Umbral will no longer fail to work if the player puts an Umbral emblem on a unit right before combat begins. Cool.
Like that.
Aurelia's ability now critically strikes at the correct rate.
IE.
Sweet. IE should be good on her.
Thank you, Loduck.
Yay. And start of game portals will no longer fail to work if a player leaves the voting area early. So for those of you who ever saw a nil portal,
wait, what?
That was why, and that should be fixed.
Oh,
there you go.
What? There's a way for you to actually troll. There's a way for the starting of game portals to not work at all. I had no idea. Oh.
It's a tiny patch.
That's it. That's a mic.
Decided to go pretty light this time.
That's not even. That's like a B patch.
How, this changes things. Give it more time to settle. Doesn't necessarily mean the next patch will be small either.
Okay.
But it is a small patch this time. So let us know what you think of these smaller patches. Again, that way things aren't changing radically. But again, give us the feedback. Let us know what you think.
Okay. Thank you, Mort. My feedback. I think duelists need a touch. The problem with duelists, in my opinion, is that duelists have too many good augments that are really good that just be like, okay, if I have this augment, it's really good. Keepers, insane. Good combat augments like Combat Caster, insane. Support items, stationary support, fine vintage, etc., insane. Omnivamp, really good. It's also insane. There's just so many augments that are good for it. Like not item-based augments, like not today, also insane. A Gargantuan Solve, really good if you can get that set up as well. And there's just too many things for duelists to capitalize upon. And so that gives them the ability to always be spiking at really big intervals and making their boards very effective for very cheap. You have like Kiana 2, Lee Sin 1, Volibear 1, Tristana 2, or something like that. And your board is actually pretty stable if you can get like a good amount of these support items going. So yeah, I think that duelists definitely need to get taken down a peg or two. I think I would take down Lee Sin a touch. Specifically, I think I would take down Lee Sin's durability. I like that Lee Sin can do damage. I want him to be able to carry, but he's just way too dominant. I think I would take down this 2-star variation more than his 1-star, because I think 1-star Lee Sin is not that amazing if you have if you actually have things set up, but 2-star Lee Sin just feels overwhelming. I also think Kiana needs to get nerfed. I think Kiana 2 is also a little bit too good. Especially if anyone who's played Kiana 3 reroll knows that Kiana 3 is way too good. That's like the main thing that I feel like needs to get addressed. I don't think Ashe needs to get nerfed, honestly. I do think that she is really good, but I think part of it is hitting everything else. And then I think actually we nerfed the hero augments and we nerfed some of the other like really oppressive stuff. I think that honestly you could nerf Zoe a little bit as well. I think Zoe is a little bit overtuned, but people just aren't playing her a lot. And I also think her stats are always fake because they're held down by the fact that she's a fortune unit. So I think that like people might end up having Zoe on their board and they underperform because they either overplay her or she's just dying on the board. So I think that her stats are actually kind of good. That also kind of applies to things like Teemo as well, but they have like the fortune tax in their stats. So yeah, outside of that, I feel like the patch is actually fine because I'm looking at all the other units. Like Silas, even though he was underperforming at the beginning, is doing better. Kane is getting buffed. Kai'Sa's getting buffed. Galio could use a little love. Annie's actually fine despite her getting nerfed a lot. And then nerfing Nautilus. Morgana's fine. Lilia is very good. Lilia actually might be a little bit too good as well, but they are nerfing Nautilus, so they technically nerfed around her. And I guess, like, I'm looking at the whole thing. I mean, there's not really that much to touch. Quite frankly, I feel like the set might be just played out in terms of, like, different things. Like, almost everything has been rerolled. The only thing that isn't really like a reroll force at this point is like Ahri's not really a reroll champion. I mean, Caitlyn is with Kog'Maw, Darius, like, so they're buffing Kha'Zix as kind of a carry. Sivir is a carry. Like, I don't know, Rek'Sai is not really a carry. So, like, for the most part, we've explored almost all the set. So I can kind of see where they're coming from actually in terms of their balance approach. They don't really want to mess with too much. There are some like other things, like other traits that could use love, like in general, if you sort by the bottom of the placements, but like some of them don't really matter that much. Like you don't really care too much about some of these like mid piece traits. I do think that 6 Arcanist is a little bit bad in the data, but that could be just like the fault of the design. I talked to Dishlip about it and thinks that 6 Arcanist is just like the way the trait structure is set up for Arcanist is just like on the weaker side because the board is just bad unless you 3-star Amumu and Alawi. I think probably the thing that they should do next is more augment changes as well to like make sure tidy things up. But 4.7 is actually acceptable. Yeah, we'll see. I guess I'm just not excited about the new patch. It feels it's like gonna be very samey unless they touch duelists. I would love to see more evolution. To their credit, Mort was saying like they are trying to let the meta breathe. I mean, one argument against bigger patches is that TFT changes so often, right? Maybe we should let the meta settle more before we make another big sweep of changes. But I can't shake this feeling that I'm just not that excited about the upcoming patch. That's okay though. Maybe something else ends up happening and ends up having more interesting things develop. Like I'm okay with seeing out a longer meta essentially. All right, good luck everybody out there. We'll see you in the patch.